3,000 years ago, a 9-year-old boy was crowned king of Egypt, an empire which was one of the most powerful in the ancient world. He would become a relatively unimportant pharaoh, involved more with the passions of life than the details of state. Yet in death, Tutankhamun would play a role in history far more significant than anyone could have imagined. Few places in the world are as forsaken and unchanging as the Sahara Desert. People's lives are simple, uncomplicated by modern measures of time and mortality. The peasants mark the passing of their lifespans by the annual rotation of pasture lands and by the seasonal tilling, planting, and harvesting of their meager crops. For most, the present and future exist in the shadow of the past. Symbolic of ancient Egyptian civilization are the enigmatic pyramids which dot the desert landscape. Giant monoliths, they are silent tributes to the genius of a bygone civilization. Many are now falling into ruin, but their crumbling walls reveal little of the purposes for their original existence. Most scholars are convinced that they were constructed as giant tombs for dead pharaohs. It is also documented that they became easy prey for grave robbers who either found or constructed their own passages within the mammoth walls so that they could strip the chambers of their precious artifacts. Realizing that the pyramids were being desecrated, the high Egyptian priests began diligently searching for a location where their royal tombs would go unnoticed and undisturbed. Across the Nile and 400 miles south of modern-day Cairo, the priests found what they had been looking for: a valley with imposing cliffs, an area that, because it could conceal countless tombs, would later become known as the Valley of the Kings. It was here that the modern quest would begin for the tomb of Tutankhamun. Just after the turn of the century, Egypt remained the keystone of the proud yet slowly diminishing British Empire. Egypt's position straddling the Suez was still all important to English military strategists. Yet for many Britons, the sprawling Sahara Desert that dominated the country represented either a warm, dry vacation spot or a land rich in archaeological treasure. The Rosetta Stone, discovered by Napoleon in 1799 and deciphered some 20 years later, finally provided the key to solving the riddle of the hieroglyphs. Written in Greek, Coptic, and in hieroglyphics, scholars were finally able to understand the tiny symbols. From pictographs and hieroglyphs unearthed during later digs in Egypt, part of the story of Tut would emerge. In search of cameras would, from these facts, recreate the days of King Tut. The boy had become crowned pharaoh in approximately 1500 BC. Information about his reign remained sketchy. All that was known was that the priestly court advisors probably extended a great deal of control over the young boy called Tutankhamun. But one significant portion of the story had not been recorded: the whereabouts of King Tut's tomb. The Valley of the Kings had already yielded the tombs of many other pharaohs. Thus, it seemed a logical place to begin the search for the final resting place of the boy monarch. 1921, Egyptian workers had excavated more than a dozen sites in the Valley of the Kings, vainly searching for Tut's tomb. The dream of finding gold, jewels, and other great riches in King Tutankhamun's grave seemed more and more an archaeologist's folly. Their work had been directed by a young, obsessive British civil servant named Howard Carter. His one passion in life was to find the tomb. Aiding him in his effort was Lord Carnarvon, an English nobleman who had originally sought refuge from England's damp weather in the healthful dryness of the Sahara. For 5 long years, Carnarvon had funded Carter's fruitless efforts to find the elusive burial plot. Despite the find of a new, more promising dig site, Carnarvon decided to return to England, threatening to cut off financial support. For another year, hundreds of workers labored over the new site that Carter had found. Then, in November 1922, Carter made an extraordinary breakthrough. He wired Carnarvon, at last, made wonderful discovery in Valley. Together, Carter and Carnarvon descended the steps to the tomb. Both trembled with nervous anticipation. For each man, the passing moments meant that he was closer to fulfilling a dream. But what would they find? Would it indeed be the undisturbed sarcophagus of Tut? The royal seals had remained untouched. But did that mean that the tomb and its contents had stayed just as they were when hidden 3,000 years before? Finally, Carter felt the last bits of mortar give way. He peered inside and was stunned by the sight before him. "What do you see?" asked Carnarvon. There was a pause. Then Carter softly replied, "Wonderful things." It took the British and Egyptian governments the next 11 years to carefully remove and painstakingly catalog all of the objects from inside the tomb. But Lord Carnarvon would not see even half of the treasure. By 1923, he would be stricken under mysterious circumstances. Prior to his return to England, Carnarvon suffered a mosquito bite. Normally, such an occurrence would not cause great alarm, but the bite became infected, and he finally succumbed to its effects. Interestingly enough, legend had said that the priests had cursed the pharaoh's tomb, and that those who disturbed it would die. Newspapers around the world announced Carnarvon's death. Then, mysteriously, others began dying. Coincidentally, each person had either been associated with the tomb's opening or the examination of the objects found inside. For a while, the curse seemed very real. But the papers neglected to mention that Carter, who was the first to enter the tomb, and hundreds of others associated with Tut, remained robust and alive. Today, there seems little fear of the curse. More than 7 million people in 6 American cities pushed their way into the Tut exhibit, eager to view the objects which had so astounded Carter and Carnarvon, and there were no reports of mysterious deaths attributed to the curse. The nearly untouched tomb of King Tut that Carter and Carnarvon had unearthed was unmatched in history. It spoke of beauty and elegance in a vanished civilization. The romance of Tutankhamun's curse unfortunately obscured the more significant story of Tut for nearly 50 years. We are just beginning to realize that his death may have contributed to one of the most powerful religious movements in history. Many Egyptologists believe that the pyramids provided final earthly protection to royalty during their transition from the material world to that of eternal peace. Dr. James Brashler heads the Institute of Antiquities and Christianity at Claremont College.
For the ancient Egyptian, death was simply a transition from one theater of existence or one arena of life to another arena, which they called the West. It was the land to which one went after existence in this life came to a conclusion. Death was simply the opening up of a new kind of life that seems to have been conceived of in terms of a paradise.
There was a panoply of gods to be pleased, and elaborate rituals had to be performed successfully before one could enter the Egyptian Garden of Eden. The common citizen did not possess such knowledge. Only the priest could guide people to life everlasting, and their special skills gave them an extraordinary hold over the lives of the Egyptians. Whether ancient Egyptians thought that they could defeat death itself through the mummification process is not known. Scientists have carefully examined the mummies of Egyptian royalty. Despite concerted efforts, researchers remain mystified by the methods utilized by the ancients to preserve the body. "3,000-year-old stone reliefs depicted the immense power wielded by the priest class in ancient Egypt. It was their responsibility to begin planning for a pharaoh's death as soon as he became king. At the time of Tutankhamun's coronation, the priests remained the single most powerful body within Egyptian society.
When Tutankhamun, a 9-year-old boy, came to the throne, the situation was ripe for change.
Gerald LaRue is a professor of religion at the University of Southern California.
Who worked with this malleable young man? Who helped to formulate his ideas? We don't know. Perhaps the great court advisor, Ai, was involved in this. Perhaps there were priests from Thebes who reached him. His predecessor, Akhenaten, had moved away from the traditional religions of ancient Egypt. Egypt had enjoyed the freedom of worship of many gods in many different forms. But Akhenaten had made a change. He had moved from polytheism to monotheism, the emphasis on one god in one form.
Following the death of Akhenaten, it is generally accepted that his belief in one god disappeared. The priests had discouraged its acceptance by the general populace because it threatened their position of power. But some scholars theorize that small groups clung to monotheism and quite possibly spread the idea across the desert. There was no way that the young child Tut could understand the religious turmoil which he had entered. The affairs of state unquestionably rested with the priests. With a child pharaoh on the throne, it would be easy for them to completely reinstate the old religion. Meanwhile, Tut wrestled with the normal problems of growing into manhood. Drawings made during Tutankhamun's reign often depict him with his young bride, the daughter of his predecessor Akhenaten and Nefertiti. Tut married his young bride when she was 12 and he only 9. Tut must have spent many carefree hours in the royal gardens, involved with the whimsical delights that only young lovers can devise. As Tut and his wife Ankensen-Paten grew up together, they seem to have possessed a great love for one another. A poem read to Tut by his bride has survived 3,000 years.
My love to thee is like the acorn which I have planted with flowers in the manner of sweet-smelling herbs. And in the acre is a pool, that in the cool of the north wind, it is a lovely place where I walk there. Your hand upon mine, my body satisfied, and my heart glad that our going together is as intoxicating as to hear thy voice. And my life depends upon hearing thee. Whenever I see thee, it is better to me than food and drink.
Tut's great appreciation for life and his intense love for Ankensen-Paten would be cut short. He would not live to his 20th birthday.
Scholars are not at all certain what caused the death of Tutankhamun. The mummy itself was somewhat decomposed because of the excessive use of unguents and spices that the priests carried out, and therefore the physical evidence is ambiguous. Some who have investigated suggest then that the death of Tutankhamun probably came as a result of respiratory ailments such as tuberculosis or pneumonia.
Still others believe that his death may have been hastened by poison. I, the great court priest who was present when Tut was crowned, now watched over the young pharaoh. Whether he was a member of a possible conspiracy with other court priests to terminate Tut's life is not known. Tut was now 19, an adult. It is possible that the priests feared they could no longer control him, and he might return to the ways of Akhenaten. Perhaps they wished him dead, for his death, like his coronation, could serve them well. Their power over the religious direction of Egypt would continue. Following Tut's death, he was launched on a journey to afterlife. The priests left behind now made a pantheon of deities, the gods of Egypt. Bedouins still trek over the same plains where Moses fled more than 2,000 years ago to avoid persecution for his belief in one God. It is possible that Moses was influenced by those who had faithfully held to Akhenaten's belief in monotheism. Once Tut died, it can be assumed that the few believers who still remained faced the wrath of the priests. It is very likely that they became a highly committed nomadic group who tenaciously clung to their singular beliefs. Tut's death may have affected the entire sweep of Western thought and religion. Not even his priestly advisors could have envisioned such a dramatic place in history for their young king. The science of Egyptology is less than 100 years old. While the glory of the Egyptian civilization has been well documented, there remains much to be uncovered and understood about its sophisticated culture. With the unearthing of each new artifact, our knowledge grows, not only about an ancient society, but its effect upon modern man as well. Only now are we beginning to appreciate how Tut's premature death may have had a significant impact on the development of the belief in one God.
Coming up next, In Search Of continues with a probe into the claim that the pyramids were not tombs for kings, but shelters against a Holocaust. Then, agents investigate the murder of Mine Workers Union candidate Jock Yablonsky and his family on FBI, The Untold Stories. And later tonight, History's Mysteries brings you the story of the Roaring '20s most successful robbers, the Newton Boys, at 8 here on the History Channel, where the past comes alive.